The briefing room aboard the Harmony's Promise was crowded with officers from a dozen different species. Lieutenant Yuna Kim stood near the holographic display, watching the simulated battle replay for the third time. The joint military exercise had been a disaster, and everyone in the room knew it. She glanced around at the faces surrounding her. Most of the alien officers wore expressions ranging from boredom to barely concealed contempt. The Krell delegation sat in the front row, their massive reptilian forms taking up twice the space of normal chairs. Commander Vekthar, the leader of the Krell contingent, lounged in his seat with his tail draped across the floor. His golden eyes were half closed, as if the entire meeting was beneath his attention. Yuna had been working with the coalition forces for 8 months now, and she still wasn't used to the casual disrespect. Earth had joined the Galactic Coalition 3 years ago after a brutal war that neither side had truly won. The peace treaty was supposed to make humans equal partners in the galaxy's premier military alliance. In reality, most alien species treated humans like children who had stumbled into an adult conversation. The Krell were the worst. They were warriors, proud of their strength and their long history of conquest. To them, humans were weak creatures who had gotten lucky with their weapons technology. Nothing more. Captain Jiwon Park, the human captain of the attached Earth vessel Defiant Dawn, stood at the front of the room. She was addressing the gathered officers, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. The exercise revealed significant coordination problems between our fleets. We lost 4 simulated vessels because our formations were not synchronized. The formations were adequate, Commander Vekthar interrupted without raising his hand, or waiting to be acknowledged. His voice was deep and rumbling like rocks grinding together. The problem was human hesitation. Your ships moved too slowly to capitalize on our offensive. Captain Park's jaw tightened, but she maintained her professional composure. Commander, if you review the tactical logs, you'll see that our ships were waiting for the signal to advance. The signal that your command vessel never sent. Vekthar snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pipe. We do not require signals to know when to strike. Warriors understand battle instinctively. Perhaps humans need more explicit instructions. Several of the other Krell officers made a chittering sound that Yuna had learned was their equivalent of laughter. Ensign Minho Choi, standing beside Yuna, shifted his weight uncomfortably. His hand moved toward the data tablet he was carrying, then stopped. He wanted to say something, but he knew better. Junior officers didn't contradict Krell commanders, not if they wanted to keep their posts. Yuna studied the holographic replay again. She had spent the entire night analyzing the exercise, running simulations comparing the results against historical data from previous coalition operations. She had found something important, something that could save lives in a real battle. But speaking up meant contradicting Vekthar, and she had seen what happened to officers who challenged Krell authority. Captain Park was speaking again, trying to redirect the conversation toward productive solutions. But Vekthar kept interrupting, kept dismissing human input, kept treating the entire meeting like a formality that he had to endure before getting back to real military work. Yuna made her decision. She stepped forward and cleared her throat. Excuse me, Commander Vekthar. I believe I've identified the actual problem with our formations. The room went quiet. Every eye turned toward her. Captain Park's expression was unreadable, but Yuna caught the slight widening of her eyes. A warning. Turn back now before you make this worse. Yuna didn't turn back. She activated her data tablet and projected a new hologram into the center of the room. It showed the battle from a different angle, with additional tactical overlays that she had programmed herself. If you look at the positioning of the Krell heavy cruisers in relation to the human frigates, you can see that we weren't too slow. We were actually holding position exactly where your battle plan indicated we should be. The problem occurred when your lead ship deviated from the agreed formation by approximately 30 degrees. This created a gap in our defensive line that the simulated enemy exploited. She highlighted the relevant section of the hologram, showing clearly how the Krell flagship had moved out of position. If we had followed you, we would have exposed our flank to enemy fire. We held position because that was the tactically sound decision based on the plan that your own officers had approved 6 hours before the exercise began. The silence in the room had changed quality. It was no longer just attention. It was the kind of silence that happened right before an explosion. Commander Vekthar rose slowly from his seat. He was enormous, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that gleamed like polished bronze under the briefing room lights. His claws clicked against the floor as he walked toward Yuna. Each step was deliberate, measured, meant to intimidate. Yuna held her ground. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her face neutral. She had grown up in the ruins of Seoul after the First Contact War. She had seen things that would give most people nightmares for the rest of their lives. She wasn't going to be frightened by a bully with scales and claws, no matter how big he was. Vekthar stopped directly in front of her, so close that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You presume to lecture me on tactics, human? I have fought in more battles than your entire species has recorded in its primitive history. I have led fleets that conquered star systems while your ancestors were still hiding in caves." "I'm not lecturing you, Commander," Yuna said quietly. "I'm presenting tactical analysis based on recorded data. The logs don't lie." "The logs are irrelevant," Vekthar growled. "They cannot capture the reality of combat. They cannot show the instinct, the warrior's sense that guides proper military decisions. These are things that humans, with your limited understanding of real warfare, cannot comprehend." Yuna opened her mouth to respond, to point out that recorded data was literally the most objective measure of what had actually happened during the exercise. But she didn't get the chance to speak. Vekthar's hand moved in a blur. The back of his clawed hand struck her across the face, hard enough to snap her head to the side. The impact sounded like a whip crack in the silent room. Pain exploded across Yuna's cheek and jaw. She tasted blood immediately, felt it running from her split lip down her chin. The room tilted for a moment, and she had to lock her knees to keep from staggering. Around the room, officers reacted. The humans jumped to their feet, hands moving toward weapons that they weren't carrying in a diplomatic briefing. The alien officers mostly watched with detached interest. The Krell contingent made that chittering sound again, pleased by their commander's dominance display. Ensign Minho Choi grabbed Yuna's arm, trying to pull her back, trying to get her away from Vekthar before things escalated further. Captain Park was shouting something, demanding order, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. Yuna touched her lip with her fingers, looked at the blood, then looked up at Vekthar. The Krell commander was staring down at her with satisfaction in his golden eyes. This was a Krell honor strike, she knew, a gesture used to discipline subordinates who had forgotten their place. It was meant to humiliate, to remind the recipient of the vast gap between them and their superior. Something cold settled in Yuna's chest. Not fear, not even anger exactly. It was the same feeling she had experienced years ago, standing in the ruins of her childhood home, surrounded by the ashes of everything she had loved. It was the moment when she had decided that she would never, ever allow herself to be helpless again. She shook off Ensign Choi's grip. She straightened her spine, ignoring the pain in her face, ignoring the blood dripping onto her uniform. She stepped forward instead of back, closing the distance that Vekthar had probably expected her to flee. Then she lifted her hand and snapped her fingers once sharply right in front of Vekthar's face. The sound was small compared to the strike that had split her lip, but in the shocked silence of the briefing room it was as loud as a gunshot. "Pay attention," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the blood in her mouth. I wasn't finished. The room seemed to freeze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Vekthar's eyes widened, his pupils contracting to slits. His mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth. For a long moment he simply stared at her, as if unable to process what had just happened. No one had ever responded to a Krell honor strike this way. The proper response was submission, apology, retreat, not defiance. Never defiance. Yuna held his gaze. Her hand was still raised from the finger snap, steady and unwavering. She wasn't backing down. She wasn't apologizing. She was waiting for him to pay attention so she could finish presenting her analysis. The moment stretched out, becoming something that Yuna knew would be talked about for years to come. This was the point where everything changed, where the fragile peace between humans and the coalition would either strengthen or shatter completely. The silence in the briefing room shattered when Commander Vekthar spoke. His voice was cold now, controlled, which somehow made it more terrifying than his earlier anger. "You dare strike back at me, human? You dare show such disrespect to a Krell commander?" Yuna lowered her hand slowly. The blood from her split lip had reached her collar, staining her uniform. "I didn't strike you, Commander. I snapped my fingers to get your attention. You hit me while I was presenting tactical data. There's a difference." Around the room, officers were beginning to recover from their shock. Captain Park moved forward, trying to insert herself between Yuna and Vekthar. Commander, Lieutenant Kim meant no disrespect. This is clearly a cultural misunderstanding. Perhaps we should all take a moment to calm down and— There is no misunderstanding, Vekthar interrupted. His eyes never left Yuna's face. This human challenged my authority in front of my subordinates. She responded to correction with defiance. Under Krell honor law, there is only one way to resolve such an insult. One of the other Krell officers stood up, a female commander named Rekthal. She was slightly smaller than Vekthar, but no less imposing. Commander Vekthar speaks truth. The human has violated honor protocols. Challenge must be issued. Captain Park's face went pale. Absolutely not. We are not following Krell honor law for a simple disagreement between officers. Lieutenant Kim is under my command, and I will handle any disciplinary issues through proper Earth military channels. Vekthar finally looked away from Yuna, turning his attention to Captain Park. This is not a matter of Earth military law. This occurred aboard a coalition vessel, between officers of the coalition fleet. Therefore, coalition law applies, and coalition law recognizes the validity of Krell honor challenges. He was right. Yuna knew he was right. When Earth had joined the coalition, they had agreed to abide by coalition military justice, which was a complicated hybrid of legal systems from dozens of different species. The Krell had made sure their honor duel system was included in that framework. They had used it before to settle disputes with other species, always emerging victorious. Ensign Minho Choi leaned close to Yuna and whispered urgently, "Don't accept. Whatever he's about to propose, just refuse. You can request a formal arbitration hearing instead. It'll take weeks, and by then everyone will have calmed down." Yuna didn't respond. She was watching Vekthar, seeing the calculation in his eyes. He wanted this. He had probably been wanting an excuse to put a human in their place since the moment Earth joined the coalition. Now she had handed him the perfect opportunity. Vekthar turned back to face Yuna directly. He stood at his full height, his tail sweeping across the floor in a gesture that she had learned meant formal pronouncement. "Lieutenant Yuna Kim of the human vessel Defiant Dawn, I, Commander Vekthar of the Krell Empire, do hereby challenge you to Karath, trial by combat, to be fought according to traditional Krell rules, to resolve the dishonor you have brought upon yourself and your species." The room erupted. Human officers started shouting objections. Some of the alien officers were speaking rapidly in their own languages, their translators struggling to keep up. Captain Park was demanding that the Coalition Arbitration Board be convened immediately. Through it all, Yuna stood quietly thinking. She could refuse. Ensign Choi was right about that. She could demand arbitration, could drag this out through official channels, could probably even get the challenge dismissed on some technicality. But then what? Every human in the coalition would know that when pushed, when challenged, when struck across the face, she had hidden behind lawyers and bureaucracy. Every alien species would see it too, and the next time a Krell officer decided to discipline a human, to put them in their place to remind them that they were the weak newcomers who didn't really belong, there would be nothing to stop them. Yuna had grown up in a world that had been invaded, conquered, and only freed through brutal warfare. She had joined the military because she never wanted to feel helpless again. She had worked and trained and studied for years to prove that humans deserved respect, not pity or contempt. And now here was the test. The real test, not a simulation or an exercise. Accept the challenge and probably die, or refuse and prove that all the alien species were right to dismiss humanity as cowards who talked big, but folded when faced with actual danger. "I accept," Yuna said clearly, her voice cutting through the chaos in the room. The noise stopped as abruptly as if someone had thrown a switch. Every head turned toward her. Captain Park looked like she had been struck herself. Ensign Choi grabbed her arm again, harder this time, desperation in his eyes. "Lieutenant Kim, you can't," Captain Park said urgently. "That's an order. I forbid you from accepting this challenge." Yuna met her captain's eyes. "With respect, Captain, you can't forbid me. Coalition law is very specific. Once a formal honor challenge is issued, the challenged party has the right to accept or refuse. Command structure doesn't override that right. It's one of the compromises that Earth agreed to when we joined." She had studied coalition law extensively, knowing that eventually someone would try to use it against humanity. She had just never expected to be the test case. Captain Park's hands clenched into fists. "You'll be killed." The Krell have never lost a Karath to another species. Never. Not once in 300 years of coalition membership. Then I'll be the first to beat one, Yuna said quietly, or I'll die trying. But either way, the next time a Krell commander thinks about hitting a human officer, they'll remember what happened here. They'll remember that we don't just accept it. Vekthar made a sound that might have been approval or might have been amusement. It was hard to tell with Krell. The human shows courage at least. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. The Kareth will take place in 3 days' time, aboard the Coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance. I suggest you use that time to prepare yourself, Lieutenant. Pray to whatever gods your species believes in. Make peace with your death. He turned and walked out of the briefing room, his Krell subordinates following behind him. They were making that chittering sound again, clearly entertained by the thought of watching a human die in ritualized combat. The moment the Krell left, Captain Park grabbed Yuna by both shoulders. What were you thinking? Do you have any idea what you've just done? I know exactly what I've done, Captain, Yuna replied. I've drawn a line. Someone had to eventually. Better me than someone who isn't ready for it. And you think you're ready? You think 3 days of preparation will let you beat a Krell warrior in single combat? Yuna thought about the training she had been doing for the past 8 months, the training she had kept quiet, that nobody except her personal instructor knew about. She thought about the Krell combat footage she had been studying, the analysis she had been running, the weaknesses she had identified in their fighting style. I think I have a better chance than you believe I do, she said. Over the next 3 days, word of the challenge spread through both fleets like wildfire. Yuna became the center of attention that she had never wanted. Human crew members approached her in corridors, some offering encouragement, others looking at her like she was already dead. The alien crew members mostly avoided her, though she caught them staring sometimes, their expressions unreadable. Dr. Sora An, the chief medical officer of the Defiant Dawn, tried everything she could think of to disqualify Yuna on medical grounds. She ran every test in her database hoping to find something, anything that would give Captain Park grounds to forbid Yuna from fighting. But Yuna was in perfect health. Better than perfect, actually. Her physical conditioning scores were in the top percentile of all human military personnel. You're going to die, Dr. An said bluntly during the final medical examination. You know that, right? This isn't bravery. This is suicide. Maybe, Yuna agreed. She was sitting on an examination table, wearing a tank top that revealed the scars on her arms and shoulders. Old wounds from the first contact war from the fighting in Seoul. But if I'm going to die anyway, I'd rather die standing up than on my knees. Ensign Minho Choi volunteered to be her second, the person who would stand witness to the combat and verify that it was conducted according to Krell honor rules. He was terrified. Yuna could see it in his eyes, but he refused to let her face this alone. I should be the one fighting, he said on the second day while Yuna was training in the ship's gym. I'm bigger than you, stronger, I have a better chance. Yuna paused in her exercises, breathing heavily. You're bigger and stronger than me, she acknowledged. But you haven't been training specifically to fight Krell for the past 8 months, I have. Size and strength won't matter if you don't know what you're doing. What have you been training for? Minho asked, confused. We've been at peace with the Krell since before we joined the coalition. We've been at peace with their government, Yuna corrected. That doesn't mean I trust them. I've been preparing for this possibility since the day I was assigned to coalition duty. She hadn't told anyone about her private training sessions, about the human combat instructor who specialized in fighting larger, stronger hen humanity was desperate and outmatched. He had taught why. The combat arena aboard the coalition flagship Eternal Vigilance was a perfect circle, 50 meters in diameter, with walls that rose up 3 meters before giving way to observation galleries. The floor was made of some kind of synthetic material that provided good traction without being soft enough to cushion falls. This was a space designed for violence, refined over centuries of honor duels between species who settled their differences with blood. Yuna stood at one entrance to the arena, wearing the light combat suit that coalition regulations allowed for Kareth challenges. It was basically reinforced fabric, offering minimal protection against impacts and cuts but not restricting movement. She had refused any armor beyond that. Armor would slow her down, and speed was going to be her only real advantage. Ensign Minho Choi stood beside her, his face pale but determined. As her second, he would verify that the combat followed proper protocols. If either combatant violated the rules, he had the authority to stop the fight. In practice, Yuna knew seconds almost never interfered. The rules of Kareth were simple and brutal. Fight until one party yields, dies, or becomes physically unable to continue. You can still withdraw, Minho said quietly. Right up until you step into the arena, you have that right. No one would blame you. Yuna checked the wrappings on her hands one last time. They were reinforced with light polymer threads, enough to protect her knuckles and wrists without adding bulk. Everyone would blame me. Humans, aliens, everyone. They'd say I got scared and ran. That I talked big but couldn't back it up. Better alive and blamed than dead and honored, Minho muttered. Yuna smiled slightly. Maybe, but I didn't join the military to play it safe. Through the entrance, she could see the observation galleries filling with spectators. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all gathering to watch a human die. Some came out of diplomatic obligation. Others came out of genuine curiosity. A few, she suspected, came because they secretly hoped to see a Krell humbled, even if they would never admit it publicly. The human delegation was there in force. Captain Park sat in the front row of the human section, her expression carefully neutral. Dr. Sora An was beside her, and Yuna could see medical equipment staged nearby. The doctor had made it clear that she expected to be collecting a body, not treating injuries. Across the arena, Commander Vekthar emerged from the opposite entrance. He wore even less than Yuna did, just a simple harness across his chest that held his clan markings. His scales gleamed under the arena lights, bronze and beautiful and terrifying. His claws were fully extended, each one filed to a razor edge. His tail moved back and forth slowly, like a predator preparing to strike. He looked confident. Why wouldn't he? He had done this 43 times before and won every single time. This was just another challenge. Another inferior species that needed to be reminded of their place in the galaxy's hierarchy. An arbiter stepped into the center of the arena. She was a member of the Vel species, tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors with her emotions. Right now she was displaying formal purple, the color of official duties. We gathered to witness Kareth, the arbiter announced, her voice amplified throughout the arena. Commander Vekthar of the Krell Empire has challenged Lieutenant Yuna Kim of Earth to trial by combat. Both parties have accepted the terms. The combat will continue until one party yields, dies, or is rendered unable to fight. Killing blows are permitted. Mercy may be granted by the victor. Are both combatants ready? Ready, Vekthar rumbled, his voice carrying across the arena without amplification. Yuna took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. Ready? Then begin. The arbiter retreated quickly to the edge of the arena. For a moment, neither combatant moved. They simply stood there, sizing each other up across the distance. Then Vekthar charged. He moved faster than something his size should be able to move, covering the distance between them in seconds. His claws were raised, aiming for a strike that would disembowel her in a single motion. This was how he had killed his last 3 challengers, Yuna knew. Overwhelming speed and power right from the start, ending the fight before his opponent could even properly defend themselves. Yuna didn't try to block. She didn't try to counter. She simply wasn't there when his claws arrived. She had studied hours upon hours of Krell combat footage. She knew how they moved, knew their tells, knew the slight shift in weight that preceded every attack. She had drilled responses to every common Krell strike until they were muscle memory. She sidestepped at the last possible moment, letting Vekthar's momentum carry him past her. As he went by, she struck at a nerve cluster on his side, just below the ribs. It wasn't a damaging blow, just a sharp jab with her knuckles. But it hit exactly where she intended. Vekthar stumbled slightly. The nerve strike didn't hurt him, not really, but it disrupted his balance for a fraction of a second. The observation galleries erupted in noise. The spectators had expected this to be over in seconds. They hadn't expected the human to still be standing, much less landing a strike of her own. Vekthar spun around, his tail whipping toward Yuna's legs. She jumped over it, landed, and immediately had to duck under a follow-up claw strike aimed at her head. The claws passed so close that she felt the wind of their passage. She rolled to the side, came up in a crouch, and had to throw herself backward as Vekthar's foot slammed down where she had just been. The impact cracked the arena floor. You are fast, Vekthar acknowledged. Faster than the others. But speed alone will not save you, human. Eventually you will tire. Eventually you will make a mistake. And then you will die. He wasn't wrong. Yuna knew she couldn't keep this up forever. Vekthar was bigger, stronger, and had more stamina than she did. If this turned into a battle of endurance, she would lose. So she had to be smarter. Vekthar came at her again, this time with a more measured approach. He was learning, adapting to her speed. His strikes came in combinations now, designed to herd her into corners, to limit her options for evasion. Yuna gave ground, but she gave it strategically. She let him push her toward the arena wall, let him think he was controlling the fight. All the while she was watching, learning, confirming the patterns she had identified in her analysis. Krell combat doctrine emphasized strength and aggression. They were taught to press advantages, to never show weakness, to dominate through sheer physical superiority. It made them formidable against opponents who fought the same way. But it also made them predictable. When Vekthar committed to what he clearly thought would be a finishing combination, a series of strikes designed to corner her against the wall and tear her apart, Yuna made her move. She didn't retreat. She advanced, getting inside his reach before he expected it. His claws passed over her head as she ducked low. She planted her foot, twisted her body, and delivered a devastating strike to Vekthar's knee. The knee was a weakness that human xenobiologists had identified years ago. Krell knees bent slightly differently than human knees, and there was a particular angle of impact that could temporarily disable the joint. Vekthar roared in pain and surprise. His leg buckled and he dropped to one knee. For the first time in the fight, he looked uncertain. Yuna didn't give him time to recover. She moved around to his side and delivered a rapid series of strikes to nerve clusters and joint locations. None of the blows were individually devastating, but together, they added up, disrupting his balance, making his movements less coordinated, slowly breaking down his physical advantage. The observation galleries were in chaos now. Aliens were shouting in dozens of languages. The human section was on its feet. Some people cheering, others too tense to make any sound at all. Vekthar swung his tail at her, a desperate move. Yuna caught it, something no one in the galleries expected, and used it to pull herself onto his back. Before he could shake her off, she locked her arm around his throat and applied pressure to the major blood vessels in his neck. For 5 seconds, she thought she might actually win right then. Vekthar thrashed, trying to throw her off, but she held on with every ounce of strength she had. Then his hand came up and grabbed her by the arm. His grip was like a vice, crushing, irresistible. He pulled her off his back and slammed her into the ground with enough force to drive the air from her lungs. Yuna's vision went dark for a moment. She felt ribs crack, felt pain explode through her entire right side. She tried to roll away, but Vekthar was already on top of her, pinning her down with his weight. "You fought well," he said, and there might have been actual respect in his voice. "Better than any opponent I have faced in years. But now this ends." He raised his claws for the killing blow. Yuna's right arm was useless, the shoulder dislocated from when he had grabbed her. Her ribs were broken, making it hard to breathe. But her left arm still worked. As Vekthar's claws descended toward her throat, Yuna's left hand shot out and struck him in the respiratory valve, the vulnerable spot on the Krell neck that she had studied extensively. It was a difficult target, small and protected by overlapping scales, but she hit it perfectly. Vekthar's claws stopped inches from her throat. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened, but no sound came out except a wheezing gasp. Yuna woke up in the medical bay of the Defiant Dawn, surrounded by the soft beeping of monitoring equipment and the antiseptic smell that all human medical facilities seemed to share. Her entire body hurt. A deep aching pain that suggested extensive healing had been done while she was unconscious. Dr. Sora An was sitting in a chair beside the bed, reading something on a data tablet. When she noticed Yuna's eyes were open, she set the tablet aside and leaned forward. "Welcome back," the doctor said dryly. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. 3 cracked ribs, dislocated shoulder, severe bruising over approximately 40% of your body, and a concussion. You're lucky to be alive." Yuna tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her ribs, forcing her back down onto the bed. "Did I win, or did I dream that part?" "You won," Dr. An confirmed. "Against all logic, common sense, and medical probability, you actually won. The entire galaxy is talking about it. You're famous now. Congratulations on your incredibly stupid, incredibly brave victory." There was genuine warmth in the doctor's voice despite her harsh words. She helped Yuna adjust the bed so she could sit up at an angle that didn't put too much pressure on her ribs. "How long until I can get back to duty?" Yuna asked. 2 weeks minimum, Dr. An said firmly. "And that's only if you follow my instructions exactly and don't do anything stupid like trying to train or exercise before you're healed." Your body has been through trauma. It needs time to recover. The door to the medical bay opened and Captain Park entered. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept since the fight. When she saw Yuna was awake, relief flooded her face. "Lieutenant Kim," she said formally, though her voice was warm. "It's good to see you conscious. How are you feeling?" "Like I fought a Krell commander in single combat," Yuna replied with a slight smile that made her split lip sting. "But alive, which is better than I expected." Captain Park pulled up another chair and sat down. Her expression became more serious. "We need to talk about what happens next. The Coalition leadership is in complete chaos over what happened. Some species are calling for you to be court-martialed for disturbing military cohesion. Others want you promoted and decorated. A few are demanding that the entire Kareth system be abolished because they claim you exploited a loophole." "I didn't exploit anything," Yuna said. "I accepted a legitimate challenge and won according to the rules." "I know that. You know that. But that doesn't stop certain factions from being very unhappy about the outcome." Captain Park rubbed her eyes tiredly. "The Krell delegation has filed 3 formal complaints with the Coalition Military Tribunal. They're claiming everything from improper training techniques to violation of combat protocols. None of it has any legal basis, but they're making noise anyway." Dr. Ahn snorted. "They're upset that a human beat their champion. Let them file all the complaints they want. The combat was recorded from 16 different angles. Every second of it is documented. She followed every rule perfectly." "The problem isn't the legal aspect," Captain Park explained. "The problem is political. Commander Vekthar was more than just a warrior. He's the nephew of one of the Krell Empire's high commanders. His defeat has humiliated an important Krell family. And the Krell don't handle humiliation well." "What does that mean for me?" Yuna asked. "It means you need to be careful," Captain Park said. "There are rumors that certain Krell officers are looking for ways to even the score. Nothing official, nothing they would do openly, but accidents happen on military vessels. Equipment malfunctions. Training exercises go wrong." Yuna absorbed this information quietly. She had known there would be consequences beyond the fight itself. Beating Vekthar hadn't just been a personal victory. It had been a statement about humanity's place in the Coalition, and statements like that always created ripples. "I understand," she said. "I'll be careful." Over the next few days, as Yuna recovered in the medical bay, she became aware of just how much her fight had changed things. News of her victory had spread throughout the entire Coalition fleet and beyond. Some human crew members started treating her like a celebrity, asking for her autograph or wanting to take pictures with her. Others seemed uncomfortable around her, as if her victory had created expectations that they weren't sure they could live up to. The reaction from alien crew members was more varied. Some species that had been dismissive of humans before now treated them with wary respect. A few aliens went out of their way to congratulate Yuna personally, admitting quietly that they had been waiting for someone to humble the Krell for years. But there was hostility too. Krell crew members glared at her when they passed in the corridors. A few other species that were allied with the Krell treated her with cold disdain. The fragile piece of the Coalition fleet was showing cracks, and Yuna was uncomfortably aware that she was standing at the center of those cracks. On the 4th day of her recovery, she had an unexpected visitor. Sub-Commander Thelvon, the Krell officer who had spoken to her before the fight, requested permission to enter the medical bay. Dr. Ahn was reluctant to allow it, but Yuna agreed to see him. She was sitting up in bed now, able to move more freely, though still in considerable pain. Thelvon entered with his tail held low, a Krell gesture of non-aggression. He looked around the medical bay with interest, taking in the human equipment and medical displays. "Lieutenant Kim," he said formally, "I wanted to speak with you if you are willing." "I'm willing," Yuna said, "though I'm not sure what we have to talk about." Thelvon pulled up a chair but didn't sit. Instead, he remained standing, which put him at a less intimidating height relative to Yuna's bed. "I wanted to explain something about Krell culture that you may not understand. What you did in the arena offering mercy to Commander Vekthar was seen by many of my species as an insult worse than defeating him." Yuna frowned. "I offered him help. I tried to show that we could move past the conflict." "How is that insulting?" "In Krell culture, a warrior defeated in Kareth has lost their honor," Thelvon explained. "The honorable thing is for the victor to grant a quick death, allowing the defeated warrior to die with dignity. By offering mercy, By offering to help him stand, you suggested that he was not even worthy of a warrior's death, that he was so pathetic that even killing him would be beneath you. Yuna hadn't known that. She had thought she was being magnanimous, showing that humans could be better than the cycle of violence. Instead, she had apparently delivered an even greater insult. I didn't mean it that way, she said quietly. I know, Thelvan replied, and that I think makes it even more significant. You acted according to human values, human mercy. You proved that humans are not just physically capable of defeating us, but that you have a completely different philosophy about conflict and honor. This frightens many Krell more than your victory in combat. He paused, his tail moving in that gesture of discomfort again. But not all Krell feel this way. Some of us, a minority perhaps, have been watching humanity since you joined the coalition. We have seen that you approach problems differently than we do. You value adaptability over tradition, cooperation over domination. These are not Krell values, but perhaps they are valuable nonetheless. What are you saying? Yuna asked. I am saying that you have made enemies among my species, but you have also made some allies. Not many, not yet, but some, and I wanted you to know that, should you need assistance in the difficult days ahead. Before Yuna could respond, the door to the medical bay burst open. Ensign Minho Choi rushed in, his face pale with urgency. Lieutenant, Captain Park needs you on the bridge immediately. There's a situation. Dr. An stepped forward. Absolutely not. My patient is still recovering and needs at least another week of... Doctor, with respect, this can't wait. Minho interrupted. The fleet is under attack. Everything in the medical bay seemed to freeze. Dr. An's objection died on her lips. Sub-Commander Thelvan's eyes widened. What kind of attack? Yuna asked, already moving to get out of bed despite the pain it caused. The Vryn, Minho said. A full raiding fleet, at least 30 ships. They hit us while we were still scattered from the training exercises. Half our vessels aren't even in formation. The Krell command ship took heavy damage in the first strike. Their commander is dead, and the whole Krell fleet is in disarray. Yuna was on her feet now, pain forgotten in the face of immediate danger. Where's Commander Vekthar? Alive, but his ship lost main power. He's trapped in a section that's venting atmosphere. Sub-Commander Thelvan made a hissing sound. If Vekthar dies, his family will blame humanity. They will say that your victory weakened him, that he died because you humiliated him. It will give them the excuse they need to demand that Earth be expelled from the coalition. Yuna looked at Dr. An. I need my uniform. You need to stay in bed for at least another week, Dr. An said, but her voice lacked conviction. They all knew that what Yuna needed and what the situation required were two different things. I'll rest when we're not being attacked by raiders, Yuna said. Uniform now. Dr. An sighed and retrieved Yuna's uniform from a storage locker. As Yuna dressed, moving carefully to avoid aggravating her injuries too much, the doctor prepared several hypo-injectors of pain medication. The bridge of the Defiant Dawn was organized chaos when Yuna arrived. Officers shouted reports across the command center while tactical displays showed the developing battle in 3 dimensions. The Vryn raiding fleet had appeared without warning, exploiting the fact that the coalition forces were still scattered from their training exercises. Captain Park stood at the center of the bridge, receiving reports from multiple sources simultaneously. When she saw Yuna enter, her expression flickered between relief and concern. Lieutenant Kim, you should be in medical bay. With respect, Captain, medical bay won't matter if we're all dead, Yuna replied. She moved to one of the tactical stations, wincing as her ribs protested the movement. The pain medication was helping, but it couldn't completely mask the damage her body had sustained. The tactical display painted a grim picture. 30 Vryn raiders against a coalition fleet that was spread across thousands of kilometers of space. The Krell command ship, Warrior's Pride, was dark and drifting. Several other vessels showed critical damage. The Vryn were using hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and fast, then retreating before the coalition ships could coordinate a response. What's our status? Yuna asked the tactical officer, a human lieutenant named Bora Kang. Not good, Bora replied grimly. The Vryn caught us with our pants down. The Krell lost their command ship in the first strike. Their fleet is scattered, no coordination. The other coalition vessels are trying to form defensive positions, but the Vryn keep hitting us from different angles. They're faster than we are, and they know it. Yuna studied the tactical display, analyzing the Vryn attack patterns. They weren't just raiding randomly. There was a strategy here, A deliberate plan to prevent the coalition forces from organizing. They're targeting command and control, she said, thinking aloud. The first strike took out the Krell flagship because the Krell were supposed to be leading this operation. Now they're hitting any ship that tries to take command, keeping us disorganized. That's the assessment our tactical AI came up with too, Captain Park said. But knowing their strategy doesn't help us counter it. We don't have time to consolidate. Every time we try to form up, they hit us again. Subcommander Thelvon had followed Una onto the bridge. He stood near the back, observing but not interfering with human command protocols. Now he spoke up, his voice cutting through the noise. The Krell fleet will not follow human commands. Our warriors will not take orders from a species we have always considered inferior. Then they'll die, Una said bluntly. Because right now we need coordinated action, and the Krell command structure is in pieces. She turned to Captain Park. Captain, I have an idea. It's risky and it requires cooperation from all coalition forces, including the Krell. I'm listening, Captain Park said. Una pulled up a tactical display and began sketching out a battle plan. The Vryn are using our scattered formation against us. They expect us to try to consolidate into traditional defensive positions, so we don't. Instead, we use our scattered position as an advantage. We make them think we're still disorganized while actually coordinating strikes from multiple vectors. She highlighted several coalition ships on the display. The human vessels here and here act as bait. We pretend to be trying to form up defensively, drawing the Vryn in. Meanwhile, the Krell heavy cruisers, even damaged, still have the best weapons in the fleet. They hold position and wait. When the Vryn commit to attacking our formation, the Krell hit them from the flanks with everything they've got. Lieutenant Bora studied the plan, her expression skeptical. It could work, but only if everyone follows the timing precisely. One ship breaks formation too early or too late, and the whole plan falls apart. That's why we need the Krell to cooperate, Una said. She looked at Subcommander Thelvon. Can you get your fleet to follow this plan? Thelvon's tail moved uncertainly. I am not the ranking Krell officer. Even if I agreed with your strategy, I do not have the authority to command the Krell fleet. Then who does have that authority right now? Thelvon paused, then said quietly, Commander Vekthar is still technically the highest-ranking Krell officer in this theater. But he is trapped aboard his damaged vessel, unable to communicate. An alarm blared across the bridge. The tactical display showed 3 Vryn raiders moving toward a cluster of coalition support vessels. They're going after our supply ships, Lieutenant Bora reported. If they destroy those, we lose our ammunition reserves and medical supplies. Una made a decision. Captain, I need a shuttle and a pilot. I'm going to retrieve Commander Vekthar. The bridge went quiet. Everyone turned to stare at her. You want to rescue the Krell commander who tried to kill you 4 days ago? Captain Park asked, her voice carefully neutral. I want to rescue the one person who can get the Krell fleet to cooperate with us, Una corrected. And yes, that happens to be the same person who tried to kill me. But if we don't get unified command, we're all going to die anyway. Dr. Sora On's voice came over the communication system. She had apparently been monitoring the bridge conversation from medical bay. Lieutenant Kim, you are in no condition to perform a combat rescue operation. Your injuries will kill me slower than the Vryn will, Una interrupted. Doctor, I appreciate your concern, but this is necessary. Captain Park studied Una for a long moment. Then she nodded. Lieutenant Choi, prepare a rescue shuttle. Lieutenant Kim will need a pilot and a security team. I'll pilot the shuttle myself, came a familiar voice. Ensign Minho stepped forward from where he had been standing near the communication station. And I volunteer for the security team. 2 more human officers immediately volunteered as well. Within minutes, Una had a team assembled. Subcommander Thelvon approached her as she was preparing to leave the bridge. Lieutenant Kim, I am coming with you. Why? Una asked. Because if you die attempting this rescue, the Krell will say you were too weak to save our commander. But if a Krell officer witnesses you risking your life to save Vekthar, it changes the narrative. It provides proof of your honor. Una nodded. She understood political calculations well enough to recognize when someone was offering useful support. All right, but you follow my orders during the rescue. Understood? Thelvon performed a slight bow, his tail held in a gesture of respect. Understood. The shuttle ride to the damaged Krell command ship was harrowing. Vryn raiders were still prowling the battlefield, and the small shuttle had to weave between debris and weapons fire. Ensign Minho piloted with surprising skill, keeping them alive through a series of close calls that left everyone's nerves frayed. The Warrior's pride was a mess. Entire sections were open to space, venting atmosphere and debris. Emergency lights flickered where main power had failed. The ship was dying, and everyone aboard her would die too if they didn't get out soon. Commander Vekthar's location? Una asked, checking her data pad. Deck 7, command section, Thelvan replied. That section lost life support 20 minutes ago. He has approximately 30 minutes of emergency air remaining. They docked with what was left of the ship's shuttle bay and made their way through the damaged corridors. Bodies of Krell crew members lay where they had fallen during the initial attack. The artificial gravity was failing in several sections, making navigation difficult. They found Vekthar in what had been the auxiliary command center. He was trapped behind a collapsed bulkhead, his emergency breather running low. When he saw Una and the rescue team, his eyes widened in surprise. You, he said, his voice coming through the breather as a distorted rasp. You came to save me? I came to save the fleet, Una corrected. She directed her security team to start cutting through the collapsed bulkhead, which requires saving you, since you're the ranking Krell officer. Vekthar watched as the human crew members worked to free him. His expression was complex, difficult to read. Shame, perhaps. Confusion. Something that might have been the beginning of understanding. It took 10 minutes to cut through the bulkhead and extract him. He was injured but functional, his scales torn in several places but nothing life-threatening. Thelvan helped support him as they made their way back to the shuttle. A Vryn raider appeared as they were crossing between ship sections, its weapons charging for a strike at the crippled Krell vessel. Minho reacted instantly, throwing the shuttle into an evasive pattern while Una fired the shuttle's defensive weapons. The shots weren't powerful enough to destroy the raider, but they were enough to make it think twice about pursuing a small target when there were bigger prey available. Back aboard the Defiant Dawn, they got Vekthar to the bridge. Dr. Ahn immediately tried to take him to medical bay, but he refused. I am needed here, he said, though his voice was weak. He looked at Captain Park, then at Una. You have a battle plan? We do, Una said. She quickly explained her strategy, showing him the tactical display and the proposed positioning of all coalition forces. Vekthar studied the plan in silence. Everyone on the bridge watched him, waiting. If he refused to cooperate, if his pride wouldn't allow him to follow a strategy developed by a human, then they were finished. Finally, he nodded. It is a sound plan. It uses our strengths appropriately. I will command the Krell fleet to follow these positions.